Walaikum salam.
Okay. Okay. And okay, we can wait a minute. And we are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast this afternoon. We have an amazing guest with us, Sister Margo Muhammad, one who I'm very humbled would take time out of her busy schedule to give us some information as well as some inspiration. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am.
Walaikum salam, Brother Josh.
Yes, ma'am. The question that we would like to know, ma'am, is when did you first hear the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
I first heard the teaching at Temple Number 11 in 1960 and was invited by my best friend, Sister Janice Muhammad, and invited me out to the temple at 35 Intervale Street in Roxbury, Mass, under Minister Lewis, now Minister Farrkhan.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, ma'am. And why did you accept the teachings?
Well, the teaching was just an inspiration to me. And Minister Farrkhan used to spend hours and hours upon hours at the library studying different subjects. So my inspiration was to come in because this was different from Christianity and my so-called religion that I belong to.
Praise be to Allah. How did your parents and your family feel about you accepting the teachings?
My father was deceased, but my mother was overwhelmed, and I invited her out to the temple also. So she enjoyed the teaching too.
Beautiful. And what was it like for you meeting the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and developing a friendship with him since the 60s?
Brother Minister Farrkhan was such an inspiration to us, and he kept a watchful eye over the believers, which made us closely tied. And when believers didn't show up at the temple, we would call them to find out what was wrong or if they needed us to help them with some kind of problem. A feeling of closeness was always felt.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. Yes, ma'am. And what was it like when the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad departed in 1975? How did that affect you and your family?
We were saddened when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad departed from us. We said, oh, what will we do now?
Yes, ma'am. And how did you reconnect back with the minister after that?
Well, of course, I attended the temple many a times, and we just, being from a close-knit family, felt tied. We felt the closeness that Minister Farrkhan instilled within us.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. And what was it like? What was your relationship like with Mother Farrakhan?
Mother Farrakhan was a jewel. She set a good example for us. Back then they had 7 children, and when we would come up to the house next door, they lived next door to the temple. The children would come out and get excited and come up to the gate and talk to us.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. And what do you do for fun, ma'am?
What do I do for fun?
Yes, ma'am.
I sew a lot. I enjoyed making tailored garments and being inspired and make tailored garments for my children and the grand people. When the children were coming up, they said, we're tired of these homemade clothes you make for us. They're beautiful, but we want to go to the stores and go shopping and pick out other things to wear. Not that we don't appreciate wearing the Muslim garments, which they wore them to temple on Sunday.
Yes, ma'am. Beautiful. And what advice would you give to future mothers?
I say to the future mothers, it's a good thing to breastfeed your children. I breastfed all of mine, and that creates a bond between you and the child, and always set a good example for your children, so they'll always remember you and come back to you. Take time for your children and do things with them. Like I would take mine, we would have library day and we would go to the library and each of the children would go to the different sections they wanted. And that was such a learning inspiration and developed the children to a higher level of learning and a higher development state.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. And a lot of the people are sending you love in the comments. Walaikum salam, Brother Daniel and Brother Joseph. And thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast. What has been your greatest joy in your tenure in the Nation of Islam, ma'am?
Being a senior in the Nation of Islam, I can look back and relish over some of the stages of development I went through. And my husband came in the nation, got his ex the same day I did in October 12th, 1962, under Minister Farrakhan.
Praise be to Allah. Beautiful, yes, ma'am.
And I can look back and set a good example for my children. In fact, Emma's a star in our crown, and she studied being a assistant minister under who was it? Your dad, Minister Rockman. So Minister Rockman was like a rock to us and to the beginning ministers. He set a good example and didn't take a no nonsense attitude.
Praise be to Allah. Beautiful, ma'am. And thank you for your sacrifice. And I want to make sure I thank your family for their sacrifice as well. What,
Yes, sir.
what type
I
of...
I had written 5 pages of things I wanted to say.
Oh, go ahead and say it, ma'am. Go ahead and say it.
Minister Farrkhan kept a watchful eye over us, and he didn't let the believers come in there with their slack talk and gossip, and he didn't put up with that. You would be set aside or put out the temple for gossiping, which is a downgrade for trying to build the nation.
Yes, ma'am.
And Minister Farrakhan had, at the time, I worked in the grocery store, and he and Sister Khadija would send a $5 list of things they wanted and needed from the store, like chicken and flour and sugar and eggs and butter. And for their vegetables, you know, they would go to the farmer's market outside of Boston and get their fruit and vegetables they needed. So that was a sacrifice for them. And then we were real poor too. I want the believers to know that. Back then, when we wore out the soles in our shoes, we used cardboard, and Minister Farrakhan wasn't too proud to do the same. And one sister mentioned that they used to get their food out of the garbage can. No, that was a lie. They went to the grocery store that I worked in under Brother James. And then Sister Eula had a bakery restaurant. He would frequent them and go down there and eat. So we had a close community. And Brother Bishop had a fish market. I don't remember the cost of the fish way back then, but I suppose it was reasonable. And our Ramadans during December our Ramadan was during the month of December, which was a short month, which we ate fish at the end of the Ramadan. So we enjoyed that, and we would have homemade bread and homemade biscuit with our bean soup and have our fish and vegetables. And then, of course, we would have our bean pie, which the nation is noted for bean pie, for our dessert.
What was this, 1960s and 70s?
That was in the early 60s to the late 60s, early 70s.
Now, Sister Margo, when you say you all were poor and had cardboard in your shoes, what made you keep going under those circumstances?
Well, we kept going because every time we would go out to the temple, Minister Farrkhan would have a new subject to teach us about the history of Islam. And he would mention how we came up from the boots of slavery into Islam. And it was just an inspiration to keep going and developing into a strong human being under the leader of the Minister Farrakhan and under the leader of the Elijah Muhammad. So we were grateful for the sacrifice that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad made for us. He endured many hardships. Minister Farrakhan would teach about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, how he lived in Georgia, and they were poor also.
Yes, ma'am.
So he was enlightened to hear Allah for the first time. When he went under the teaching to hear Allah for the first time, he knew who he was. And Allah said, well, how do you know that? And I don't remember his exact words, but it was all inspiring for us to shine and do better and be upright Muslims and offer something as a citizen to the community.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. And my sisters, Miriam and Naima send the greetings. Sister Annette Faiza Muhammad sends the greetings. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Annette. I look forward to interviewing you one day, inshallah. And Sister Wendy says assalamu alaikum as well. Now, in Boston, you're in the 60s, the most honorable Mrs. Farrkhan is shopping at the grocery store you're working at. The racial tension was thick in the 60s, according to my study of history. Did you ever fear for your life were you ever faced with fear? And if so, how did you overcome that fear?
Oh, I lived on the third floor in our house with Sister Betty Ann, and we had two or three other sister roomers with us. And our neighbor across the street used to intimidate us and want to beat us up and meet us. And I said to her, if you coming after me to beat me up, make sure you bring some help with you, because I'm not afraid to go down, you know? So we would have many challenges from our neighbors, but that didn't keep us from being Muslims.
Sister May's house for her. The minister's mom. Sister May.
And then when we were young, I wanted to interject this. I guess you're gonna line up what I'm talking about. But we lived in Mother Farrakhan's house when we were coming up. And she was an inspiration to us too. And many times we would be overwhelmed when Minister Farrakhan would come visit Sister May, and we would just be tickled pink to stop Minister Farrakhan and ask him all kind of questions. And he always took time for us because he was like a big brother to us. He always took time to answer our questions. And no matter how simple the questions were or how detailed they were, he always had an intelligent answer for us. So we thank him for all the many hours he spent in the library. That was just time consuming for him.
Praise be to Allah. And I thank you again for your sacrifice, and thank your family for their sacrifice as well. What advice would you give to future wives, ma'am?
For future wives, be an inspiration for your husband. And when he comes home tired, try to meet him at the door with a cup of coffee, a glass of milk, or a nice warm hug and a kiss. And always show a positive attitude towards your husband. That way it's reiterated to you.
Beautiful. Excellent. Yes, ma'am. And have you seen the most honorable Mrs. Farrkhan after 1975, like after the Boston, once he stood back up? Did you get a chance to see him then?
Oh, all the meetings that we attended, my daughter would come with us, and Minister Farrkhan would reach over and he would say, "Come in, Sister Margo," and he would shake our hand, and Sister Khadija was right there with him, and they'd be tickled pink to see me and them. He'd say, "I know who you are." So that was really beautiful for him to remember this one in a million face. I know he had many faces to remember from Boston and New York, but it was just, it warmed my heart that he would take time out to shake our hand and ask us how we were doing.
Praise be to Allah. Will you ever write a book on your life, ma'am?
No, sir. At this point, I don't think I'm that interested yet, but I may, with all these notes, I may consider it with the rest of the family and maybe, some other believers, or if we wanted a book, like a memoir book, some of the things that the old believers went through, that would be interesting for us to compile something like that. And or maybe put it in paperback form.
Yes, ma'am.
That would be a monument for us as pioneers. We were in the first phase, and we laid the foundation down with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan. They put many diligent sacrifices and hours into our development. And I'm hoping the new believers just appreciate the sacrifices we made, and the few sacrifices they make. We laid the foundation, so y'all can step into the foundation and build up the nation. And the leader, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, would say, what a mighty day it'll be when the elite join forces with us. The nation will flourish and grow. And we see that happening now, that a lot of the pioneers and the old believers have different businesses that contribute to building the nation.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. Excellent. Yes, ma'am. And speaking of businesses, ma'am, I have a quick 60-second commercial break because I want to thank all of the sponsors of this week's episode of the People's Podcast. Thank you all. Starting, if you would like to be a sponsor, please Cash App. Okay, here we go. Cash App, the People's Podcast. It is because of you that we are able to keep this great history going. I want to thank, starting with my brother's podcast. My brother's sponsorship, Rashad Muhammad, Street Premiere Media Production. He's a 4K camera and drone. He does television and film editing. Thank you very much for Street Premiere. My sister Miriam, ABC I Love Me, color.
Everybody had businesses in the first.
My sister Naima, Stay On Point Dance Academy, LLC. She teaches ballet virtually to young girls all across the country. Supreme Men's and Boys Urban Wear out of St. Louis, Missouri. He's going to keep you fresh and dripping with the best fashion. Thank you very much, sir. I see you all in the comments. Thank you all for you continue to show love to the People's Podcast and to Sister Margo, Raising Black Millionaires. Sister Tia Muhammad. She teaches economic empowerment through her cards for young children. Thank you very much. Flashcards. Brother Kenneth Muhammad, bow tie maker extraordinaire. He will ship bow ties to you all across the country. Thank you very much, Brother Kenneth. Brother Todd X. McGraw, Supreme Team Insurance. Thank you very much. If you need your insurance done, I'm coming right back to you, Sister Margo, for some more of this great history that we're receiving of the early days of the Most Honorable Mrs. Farrakhan in Boston. Brother Chantel X, the X and Express. He hires truck drivers and he specializes in refrigeration. I want to thank Brother Jabbar Muhammad, Client First Construction, painting, carpentry, flooring, plumbing, etc. in the Chicago area and the Memphis, Tennessee area as well. Thank you all for your businesses. We support all of the businesses. Sister Landra L. Muhammad, Navy Beans More Than Bean Pies. Thank you, Sister Lovett, for being in the comments. Dr. Henry M. Carter, King Henry's Turkey Legs, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. If you need some turkey legs, reach out to Dr. Carter. Brother Rashad Muhammad, who I interviewed yesterday, COVID-19 disinfecting cleaning services in Chicago area. My father's book, A Soldier in the Movement of Christ, AbdulSharif.com. And Last but not least, my 2 books, Cleopatra, which is a children's book on Amazon, and also No Father, No Excuse, which is on Amazon as well. Thank you all for your donations. Please cash out the People's Podcast and help us keep the podcast going. Okay, Sister Margo.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. What advice would you give to the future generations to keep their faith, to stay 10 toes down in Islam so that we may hold our faith like you have done after all of these years?
Yes, sir. To the young believers coming in the nation, the basic thing is to keep up prayer. And when you think of Allah during the day, you call on Allah when you have problems, and seek the other believers that have been in the nation so they can inspire you and give you advice to strengthen your development and help you rear your children, and maybe help you even communicate with your boss and the people around you, and be an example for your neighbors also, because they're watching you more than your family, and they can tell you who comes and goes in your house and tell you about what your lifestyle is like. So be an inspiration and set a good example for yourself and your family and your neighbors, so they'll want to come join the Nation of Islam like you.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, ma'am. Sister Margo, what type of music do you listen to?
I'm from the old school. I can listen to all the music, but I prefer jazz.
Okay.
And I love it after the teaching when we hear Minister Farrkhan play the violin. He was a great violin player. It takes great skill to play the violin. And daughter Zenobia studied the violin, and there were many screeching noises, and I would have to say, "Oh my goodness!" But she kept at it. But to hear the violin music played by Minister Farrakhan, especially during the play he wrote, Organa, which is Negro spelled backward.
Yes,
Minister
ma'am.
Farrakhan is one of the greatest violin players I've heard, and will continue to hear him. Whenever I hear him playing the violin, I stop and I smile and I say, I know this Minister Farrakhan.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, ma'am. And my sister played the violin as well, Naima, when she was younger. So I would have to listen to the screeching noise as well while she would practice the violin. Sister Margo, what would you like your legacy to be, ma'am?
My legacy would be that I try to inspire those around me and my family. And maybe the greatest talent I try to develop was patience. Patience took me a long way. And I'm glad I had that patience, because hubby and I, we raised 13 little people. We had 2 sets of twins. And we try to be a good example for them.
Praise be to Allah. I didn't know you had 13. My goodness. Praise be to Allah. That's beautiful. Yes, ma'am. And how has being a grandmother, how has that impacted you?
Oh, the grand people love me. Every time they see me, they want to come up to me, and some of them say, we're going to only eat most of the food that grandma fixed, because it's not all spiced up, and it tastes nutritious. And I remember all those cooking classes I went through as a young MGT, learning how to cook different food and how to balance it out and, offer appetizing meals.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. Well, I want to thank you again, Sister Margo, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I want to thank your family for their sacrifice. We stand on your shoulders and we're grateful. We don't take your sacrifice for granted. And may Allah continue to bless you and your family, ma'am. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for taking time out for this old soldier.
Oh, man, it's my honor, ma'am. And may Allah bless everyone who is watching as well. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Brother Josh.